The simulation chamber smelled like ozone and burnt metal. Cadet Elara Moss stood in the center of the training ring, her breath visible in the cold air, when the holographic blade came down faster than any human reflex should allow. The blade severed her left arm cleanly at the shoulder. Blood sprayed in a bright arc across the white floor. The instructor, a towering Kryn named Vekar, froze mid-sentence, his segmented mandibles clicking in disbelief. Elara did not scream. She laughed. Then she bent down, picked up her own arm with her remaining hand, and swung it like a club straight into Vekar's face. He collapsed, unconscious, before the medics even reached the platform. The training academy on Sentinel Station orbited a red dwarf star 17 light-years from Earth. It was a proving ground for interstellar defense recruits, a place where 43 different species trained side by side in preparation for the kind of warfare that spans solar systems. Elara Moss had arrived 3 months earlier as part of the first human cohort admitted under the Accord of Shared Skies. She was 24 years old, born in a small town in Montana, and she had never left Earth before stepping onto the shuttle that brought her here. Her file listed no combat experience, no military background, and no exceptional physical metrics. Her instructors had wondered why she was chosen. Now they knew. The medical bay was stark and white, lit by panels embedded in the ceiling that hummed softly. Elara lay on a regeneration table, her left shoulder wrapped in a biogel sleeve that glowed faintly blue. The arm itself had been reattached within minutes, the nanobots already knitting muscle and bone back together with surgical precision. She felt a dull ache where the limb had been severed, but it was distant, manageable, like a bruise she could ignore. Dr. Sarin, a Delphine physician with translucent skin and 3 fingers on each hand, hovered nearby, scanning her vitals with a handheld device. "Your pain receptors are functioning normally," Dr. Sarin said, her voice soft and melodic. "The nerve endings registered the trauma. You should have been incapacitated." Elara turned her head to look at the doctor. "I felt it," she said. "It just didn't matter." Dr. Sarin's pale eyes narrowed. "That is not a normal human response." "Maybe not," Elara said. She flexed her reattached fingers, watching them curl and straighten. The movement was stiff but improving. "But it's mine." Across the room, Lieutenant Oren, a human liaison officer in his 40s with graying hair and a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, stood with his arms crossed. He had been present during the simulation. He had seen everything. "You knocked out an instructor," he said. "With your own severed arm." Elara smiled faintly. "He said humans fear pain. I wanted to correct him." Oren exhaled slowly. "You could have ended your career before it even started." "Or I could have started it properly," Elara said. She sat up, ignoring Dr. Sarin's protest, and swung her legs off the table. The biogel sleeve pulsed once, then sealed itself. "Instructor Vekar underestimated me. He won't make that mistake again." Oren studied her for a long moment. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless." "Why can't it be both?" Elara asked. Dr. Sarin made a note on her device. "I am recommending a full psychological evaluation." Elara nodded. "Fine, but I'm not broken, I'm just different." The next morning, Elara returned to the training grounds. The simulation chamber had been cleaned, the blood scrubbed away, the holographic systems reset. A small crowd of cadets had gathered near the entrance, whispering among themselves. Most of them were not human. There were Kryn with their armored exoskeletons, Vale with their bioluminescent markings, and Tarn with their 4 arms and triple-jointed limbs. Elara walked past them without breaking stride. A few of them stepped back. One of them, a Vale named Iskra with pale green skin and silver eyes, fell into step beside her. "Is it true?" Iskra asked. "You beat the instructor with your own arm." Elara glanced at her. "It's true." Iskra's eyes widened. "Why didn't you scream?" Elara shrugged. "Screaming wouldn't have changed anything. I needed to act." Iskra was quiet for a moment. I would have passed out, she admitted. Most of us would have. Most of you didn't grow up where I did, Elara said. She pushed open the door to the training hall and stepped inside. The hall was massive, a circular arena with tiered seating that could hold hundreds of spectators. At the center of the floor stood Instructor Vekar. His face was bruised where Elara's severed arm had struck him, the chitin cracked in a spiderweb pattern across his left cheek. He looked up as Elara approached. His mandibles clicked once. "Cadet Moss," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, and edged with something that might have been respect. "You have returned." Elara stopped a few meters away. "Yes, sir." Vekar tilted his head. "I underestimated your species. That was my error." "It was," Elara agreed. A ripple of murmurs spread through the cadets watching from the upper tiers. Vekar raised one clawed hand and the room fell silent. "Pain is a universal constant," he said. "It is the body's warning system. It tells us when to retreat, when to seek safety. I believed humans, like most species, would be ruled by that instinct. You proved me wrong." Elara met his gaze. "Pain is just information. It doesn't control me." Vekar's mandibles clicked again, a sound that among his people signaled approval. "Then you will prove it again. Today's exercise will test your limits." The simulation began without warning. The floor beneath Elara's feet shifted, and suddenly she was standing on a narrow bridge suspended over a chasm that seemed to stretch into infinity. The air was thin and cold, and the wind howled around her. On the opposite end of the bridge stood a figure, humanoid but featureless, made of shifting black smoke. The figure raised one hand, and the bridge began to collapse. Elara ran. Her boots pounded against the metal grating as sections of the bridge fell away behind her. She leaped across a gap, her fingers catching the edge of the next platform, and hauled herself up. The figure was closer now, its form solidifying into something more tangible, more dangerous. It moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance in seconds. Elara did not hesitate. She threw herself forward, tackling the figure at the waist, and they both went over the edge. They fell together, the chasm opening up beneath them, and then the simulation reset. Elara was back on solid ground, her heart pounding, her breath coming in short gasps. Vekar stood before her, his expression unreadable. "You chose to fall," he said. "I chose to act," Elara replied. "Standing still would have killed me." Vekar nodded slowly. "You are learning." The weeks that followed were a blur of training, simulations, and evaluations. Elara's reputation spread quickly through the academy. She became known as the human who did not fear pain, the cadet who had laughed after losing an arm. Some of the other recruits admired her. Others feared her. Elara did not care either way. She focused on the work, on mastering the skills that would keep her alive when the simulations became real. She learned to fire plasma rifles with precision, to navigate zero-gravity environments, to read the subtle cues of alien body language. She learned to trust the people around her, even when their faces and forms were nothing like her own. One evening, after a particularly grueling session in the combat simulator, Elara found herself in the observation deck overlooking the station's main hangar. The deck was empty except for a single figure standing near the viewport. It was Iskra, the Veil cadet who had asked her about pain weeks earlier. Elara approached quietly, her boots making soft sounds against the floor. Iskra did not turn around. "I failed the pain tolerance test today," Iskra said. "They had to pull me out before I passed out." Elara stood beside her, looking out at the hangar below. Dozens of ships were docked there, their hulls gleaming under the station's lights. "It's not a failure," Elara said. "It just means you have to try again." Iskra glanced at her. "How do you do it? How do you ignore pain?" Elara was quiet for a moment. "I don't ignore it," she said. "I feel it, every second of it. But I grew up in a place where stopping wasn't an option. My mom was sick for years, terminal. I watched her fight through pain every day until the end. She taught me that pain is just another thing you live through." It doesn't define you unless you let it. Iskra's silver eyes glistened. I am sorry for your loss. Elara nodded. Me too, but it made me who I am, and I'm not going to waste that. Iskra smiled faintly. You are very strange, Elara Moss. I get that a lot, Elara said. The two of them stood there in silence, watching the ships below, and for the first time since arriving at Sentinel Station, Elara felt something close to peace. The first major field exercise took place 6 weeks after Elara's arm had been severed. The cadets were divided into squads of 6 and dropped onto a barren moon designated Training Zone Epsilon. The objective was simple: survive for 72 hours while completing a series of tactical challenges scattered across the moon's surface. Communication with the station was restricted to emergencies only. Medical support was delayed by design. Elara's squad consisted of herself, Iskra, a Kryn named Threx, a Tarn named Quill, a human named Jonas from New Zealand, and a Vale named Corvin who rarely spoke but moved with eerie precision. They landed in a crater half a kilometer wide, the shuttle kicking up clouds of dust that took minutes to settle. The moon's gravity was lighter than Earth's, and Elara adjusted her movements, taking shorter steps to avoid losing her footing. The sky above was black and endless, scattered with distant stars. Threx, the squad leader by default due to his rank and experience, activated a holographic map projected from his wrist device. First checkpoint is 3 kilometers north, he said. Terrain is rough. We move in formation. The squad fell into line, Jonas taking point, Elara bringing up the rear. The moon's surface was jagged and uneven, covered in loose rocks and deep fissures that could swallow a person whole. They moved carefully, each step deliberate. An hour into the march, Jonas raised a fist, signaling a halt. Ahead, the ground had collapsed into a sinkhole 30 meters across. At the bottom, something moved. Elara crouched low, her rifle raised, and peered over the edge. The creature at the bottom of the sinkhole was unlike anything she had seen before. It had 6 legs, a segmented body covered in bony plates, and a tail that ended in a barbed spike. Its eyes were milky white, unseeing, but it moved with terrifying speed, circling the perimeter of the sinkhole as if sensing prey above. Training drones, Threx said quietly. Designed to mimic hostile wildlife, lethal if provoked. Can we go around? Jonas asked. Threx shook his head. The checkpoint is on the other side, we have to cross. Elara studied the sinkhole. There was a narrow ledge running along the eastern wall, barely wide enough for a single person. We go one at a time, she said, quiet and slow. If we don't disturb it, it won't attack. Threx hesitated, then nodded. Moss, you go first. Elara slung her rifle across her back and stepped onto the ledge. The rock was loose beneath her boots, crumbling with each step. She moved carefully, her body pressed against the wall, her hands gripping the jagged surface. Below, the creature stopped circling. Its head tilted upward and Elara froze. The creature let out a low, guttural hiss. Then it leaped. Elara threw herself backward, her body twisting in midair, and the creature's barbed tail scraped across her thigh, tearing through the fabric of her suit. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, but she landed on the opposite side of the ledge and rolled to her feet. Blood soaked her leg, but she kept moving. She reached the far side of the sinkhole and turned back, raising her rifle. One at a time, she shouted. Fast. The squad moved quickly, each member crossing the ledge while Elara covered them. The creature lunged twice more, but Elara's shots kept it at bay, the plasma bolts searing into its armored hide. By the time Corvin, the last to cross, reached safety, Elara's leg was numb, the pain dulled by adrenaline and willpower. Doctor. Saren's voice echoed in her mind. You should have been incapacitated. But she was not. She never was. The checkpoint was a small shelter built into the side of a rock formation, barely large enough for the squad to fit inside. Threx activated the terminal inside, confirming their arrival, and the squad collapsed onto the floor, exhausted. Jonas opened a medkit and tossed it to Elara. "Your leg," he said. Elara peeled back the torn fabric of her suit. The wound was deep, a jagged gash that ran from her hip to her knee. She cleaned it methodically, applied a coagulant gel, and wrapped it in a compression bandage. The pain was there, dull and persistent, but she worked through it, her hands steady. Iskra watched her with wide eyes. "You are bleeding heavily," she said. "It's manageable," Elara replied. "You should rest," Threx said. Elara shook her head. "We have 2 more checkpoints to reach. I'll rest when we're done." Jonas leaned back against the wall. "You're insane." Elara smiled faintly. "You're not the first person to say that." The second checkpoint was located inside a network of caves 15 kilometers to the west. The squad reached the entrance just before nightfall, the temperature dropping rapidly as the moon's sun set. Inside, the caves were pitch black, the only light coming from the glow of their helmet lamps. The air was cold and damp, and every sound echoed endlessly. Elara moved carefully, her rifle raised, her eyes scanning the darkness. The caves twisted and turned, a labyrinth of narrow passages and sudden drops. Twice, the squad had to backtrack when they reached dead ends. Twice, Elara felt the weight of exhaustion pulling at her, but she pushed it aside. She had learned long ago that exhaustion was just another form of pain, and pain was just information. They found the second checkpoint deep within the caves, a small alcove marked by a glowing terminal. Threx activated it, and the squad paused to catch their breath. Quill, the Tarn who had said little since the mission began, sat down heavily, all 4 of his arms resting on his knees. "I did not expect it to be this difficult," he admitted. "It's supposed to be difficult," Jonas said. "That's the point." Elara checked her rifle, ensuring the charge was full. "We're halfway done. 1 more checkpoint and we're clear." Iskra looked at her. "Your leg is still bleeding." Elara glanced down. The bandage was soaked through, dark with blood. She applied another layer of gel, wrapped it tighter, and stood. "It's fine." Iskra shook her head. "You are going to collapse." "I'm not," Elara said. "Not until this is over." The final checkpoint was located on a plateau at the moon's equator, a 6-hour march from the caves. The squad moved through the night, their pace slowing as fatigue set in. Elara's leg throbbed with every step, the pain sharpening into something that could not be ignored, but she kept moving. She focused on the rhythm of her breathing, the sound of her boots against the ground, the distant horizon where the plateau waited. Jonas fell into step beside her. "You're limping," he said. "I know," Elara replied. "Why don't you stop?" Elara glanced at him. "Because stopping means giving up, and I don't do that." Jonas was quiet for a moment. "My dad used to say the same thing. He was a firefighter. Died in a building collapse when I was 12. Elara nodded. "I'm sorry. He taught me to push through," Jonas said. "But even he knew when to stop. You don't." Elara smiled faintly. "Maybe that's my problem." They reached the plateau just as the sun rose. The checkpoint was a simple beacon planted in the ground, its light pulsing steadily. Threx activated it, and the terminal confirmed their success. The squad collapsed onto the ground, too tired to celebrate. Elara sat down slowly, her leg finally giving out, and leaned back against a rock. The pain was overwhelming now, a roaring tide that threatened to pull her under, but she had made it. They had all made it. Iskra sat beside her, her silver eyes filled with something that looked like admiration. "You did it," she said. Elara closed her eyes. "We did it." The shuttle arrived 2 hours later, and the squad was evacuated back to Sentinel Station. Elara spent the next 3 days in the medical bay while Dr. Sarin repaired the damage to her leg. The doctor worked in silence, her expression unreadable, and when she was finished, she turned to Elara with a look that was part frustration, part awe. "You should have died out there," Dr. Sarin said. "The blood loss alone should have incapacitated you." Elara shrugged, "But it didn't." Dr. Sarin shook her head. "You are not invincible, Cadet Moss. One day your body will fail you." "Maybe," Elara said, But not today. The weeks following the field exercise brought a shift in how the other cadets saw Elara. She was no longer just the human who had laughed after losing an arm. She was the cadet who had crossed a sinkhole with a creature snapping at her heels, who had marched for hours on a shredded leg, who had refused to stop no matter the cost. Some of the cadets sought her out, asking for advice, for training tips, for reassurance that they too could push past their limits. Others avoided her, unnerved by her relentless determination. Elara did not mind either way. She had not come to Sentinel Station to make friends. She had come to prove herself. One afternoon, Lieutenant Oren called her to his office. The room was small and cluttered, filled with datapads, star charts, and a single framed photograph of a woman and two children. Oren gestured for Elara to sit. "I've been reviewing your performance," he said. "You're at the top of your cohort in every category except one." Elara raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" "Self-preservation," Oren said. He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "You take risks that no one else would take. You push yourself beyond safe limits. That makes you effective, but it also makes you unpredictable." Elara met his gaze. "Unpredictable isn't the same as reckless, isn't it?" Oren asked. "You knocked out an instructor with your own severed arm. You crossed hostile terrain on a wounded leg. You refuse to acknowledge pain as a limitation. That's not courage, cadet, that's a death wish." Elara's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to die, I'm trying to live. There's a difference." Oren studied her for a long moment. "Why are you here, Elara? Why did you join the academy?" Elara was quiet. She thought about her mother, about the years spent watching her waste away, about the helplessness she had felt every day. "Because I needed to do something that mattered," she said finally. "My mom spent her whole life fighting and she lost. I'm not going to lose, not to pain, not to fear, not to anything." Oren's expression softened. "Your mother would be proud of you." Elara looked away. "I hope so." Oren stood and walked to the window, looking out at the station's bustling corridor below. "There's a reason I called you here," he said. "The academy is selecting cadets for a special program. It's voluntary, high-risk, and experimental. They're looking for people who can operate under extreme conditions, who can make decisions when every option is terrible. You fit the profile." Elara's heart quickened. "What kind of program?" "Deep space reconnaissance," Oren said. "Long-duration missions in uncharted sectors. You'd be working with alien species, facing unknowns we can't even predict. The mortality rate is 40%. Elara did not hesitate. "I'm in." Oren turned to look at her. "You didn't even ask for details." "I don't need details," Elara said. "If it's dangerous, if it matters, I want to be part of it." Oren smiled faintly. "You're exactly what they're looking for." The selection process for the reconnaissance program took place over 2 weeks. The cadets who volunteered were put through a series of tests designed to measure not just physical endurance, but psychological resilience, adaptability, and decision-making under pressure. Elara excelled in every category. She completed endurance trials that left other cadets vomiting from exhaustion. She solved tactical puzzles that required her to choose between impossible outcomes. She faced simulated interrogations where holographic enemies threatened her with pain, with death, with failure. She did not break. She never broke. On the final day of testing, the cadets were brought to a large auditorium. Commander Solis, a human woman in her 60s with silver hair and a stern expression, stood at the podium. "You have all demonstrated exceptional skill and determination," she said. "But the reconnaissance program requires more than skill. It requires trust. You will be working in small teams, often isolated for months at a time. You will depend on each other for survival. If you cannot trust your teammates, you will fail." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "We have selected 12 cadets for the program. Your names will be posted outside this auditorium in 1 hour. If you are chosen, report to Docking Bay 7 tomorrow at 0600 hours. Dismissed." Elara stood with Iskra, Jonas, and a handful of other cadets outside the auditorium, waiting for the list to appear. The minutes stretched, each one longer than the last. When the holographic display finally flickered to life, Elara scanned the names quickly. Her name was third on the list. Iskra's was fifth. Jonas's was ninth. Iskra let out a breath she had been holding. "We made it." Jonas grinned. "I can't believe it." Elara nodded, her chest tight with something that might have been pride or fear or both. "We made it." The following morning, Elara stood in docking bay 7, her gear packed, her rifle slung across her back. The bay was massive, large enough to hold a dozen ships, and at the center was a sleek reconnaissance vessel with a name stenciled on its hull, the Horizon's Edge. The 12 selected cadets gathered near the boarding ramp, their expressions a mix of excitement and apprehension. Commander Sally stood before them, her hands clasped behind her back. "This ship will be your home for the next 6 months," she said. "You will travel to the edge of charted space and beyond. You will encounter phenomena we do not understand, species we have never met, and dangers we cannot predict. Some of you will not come back." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "But if you succeed, you will change the future. You will open doors that have been closed for centuries. You will prove that cooperation between species is not just possible but necessary. That is your mission. That is your purpose." Elara felt a surge of determination. This was what she had been waiting for. This was what mattered. Commander Solis nodded once. "Board the ship. Your journey begins now." The Horizon's Edge lifted off smoothly, the station shrinking behind them as the ship accelerated into the void. Elara stood in the observation deck, watching the stars stretch into lines of light as they entered faster-than-light travel. Iskra joined her, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of the viewport. "Are you afraid?" Iskra asked. Elara thought about it. "A little, but fear is just information too." Iskra smiled. "You really are strange, Elara Moss." Elara returned the smile. "I'll take that as a compliment." The ship hummed around them, carrying them into the unknown, and Elara felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt ready. The first month aboard the Horizon's Edge was spent adjusting to life in deep space. The ship was smaller than Elara had expected, with narrow corridors, compact living quarters, and a galley that could barely fit the entire crew at once. The 12 cadets were divided into 4 teams, each responsible for different aspects of the mission. Elara, Iskra, and Jonas were assigned to Team Delta, along with a Kryn engineer named Vren. Their primary role was reconnaissance and first contact protocols. They spent their days running simulations, studying alien languages, and learning to operate the ship's scanning equipment. The work was intense, but Elara thrived on it. For the first time since leaving Earth, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The crew's dynamic took time to solidify. Vren was quiet and methodical, preferring to work alone unless absolutely necessary. Jonas was the opposite, filling silences with jokes and stories, his easygoing nature a balm against the tension that crept in during long shifts. Iskra was somewhere in between, thoughtful and observant, always watching, always learning. Elara found herself bonding with them in small, unexpected ways. She taught Jonas how to field strip a plasma rifle in under 30 seconds. Vren showed her how to reroute power through the ship's auxiliary systems. Iskra shared stories of her homeworld, a place covered in bioluminescent forests that glowed at night like a living sky. One evening, after a particularly grueling simulation, the 4 of them sat in the galley, sharing rations and swapping stories. Jonas leaned back in his chair, balancing it on 2 legs. "So, Elara," he said, "why'd you really join the academy? And don't give me the 'I wanted to do something that mattered' line. We all know it's deeper than that." Elara took a sip of water, considering her answer. "My mom had cancer, pancreatic, stage 4 by the time they caught it. She fought for 3 years. Every day was pain, but she never stopped. She kept going to work, kept making dinner, kept pretending everything was fine. I was 16 when she died. I didn't know how to process it, so I just kept moving, kept doing things, kept pushing. It became a habit. Jonas's expression softened. That's rough. Elara nodded. It was, but it also taught me something. Pain doesn't have to stop you. It can if you let it, but it doesn't have to. Iskra reached across the table and placed a hand on Elara's arm. Your mother would be proud of you. Elara smiled faintly. That's what everyone keeps telling me. 2 months into the mission, the horizon's edge entered uncharted space. The stars outside the viewport were different here, denser, brighter, arranged in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The ship's scanners picked up a signal, faint but unmistakable, emanating from a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Commander Solis called the crew to the bridge. We've detected a structure on that moon, she said, gesturing to the holographic display. It's artificial, non-human. We're going to investigate. Team Delta was assigned to the initial landing. Elara, Iskra, Jonas, and Vren boarded a shuttle and descended to the moon's surface. The structure was a towering monolith, at least 50 meters tall, made of a material that shimmered like liquid metal. It was surrounded by smaller structures, all in varying states of decay. The air was thin but breathable, and the gravity was slightly less than Earth's. Elara stepped off the shuttle, her boots crunching against the gray soil, and approached the monolith. Up close she could see patterns etched into its surface, symbols that might have been a language or a map or something else entirely. Jonas scanned the structure with a handheld device. It's old, he said. Really old, like millions of years old. Vren moved closer, his clawed fingers tracing the symbols. This is technology beyond anything we have encountered. Iskra looked up at the top of the monolith where a faint light pulsed. It is still active. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. We need to document everything. Take scans, photos, samples. If this is what I think it is, this changes everything. They worked for hours, mapping the structure, recording data, collecting fragments of the smaller ruins. As the sun set, the monolith began to glow brighter, the light spreading through the symbols like veins of fire. Elara stood before it, mesmerized, and then she heard a sound, a voice. It was not a language she recognized, but somehow she understood it. Who are you? The voice asked. Elara's breath caught. My name is Elara Moss, I'm from Earth. The voice was silent for a moment. Earth, a young world, a fragile world. We're learning, Elara said. We're trying to be better. The voice seemed to consider this. Pain defines you. It shapes you. Do you fear it? Elara thought about her mother, about the simulation chamber, about the wound on her leg. No, pain is just part of living. The voice hummed, a sound like wind through distant trees. Then you are ready. The light flared, blindingly bright, and Elara felt something shift inside her, a connection forming, a thread linking her to the monolith, to the moon, to something vast and ancient and unknowable. Then the light faded and she was standing alone, her team staring at her in shock. What just happened? Jonas asked. Elara looked down at her hands. They were glowing faintly, the light fading as she watched. I don't know, but I think it chose me. Back on the horizon's edge, the crew analyzed the data from the moon. The symbols on the monolith were a language, but also a map, pointing toward a region of space designated as the Dark Reach, a sector that no species had ever successfully explored. The voice Elara had heard was likely an artificial intelligence, left behind by a civilization that had vanished long before humans even existed. Commander Solis studied the map, her expression unreadable. This is unprecedented, she said. If this civilization left behind more structures like this, we could learn things that would revolutionize our understanding of the universe. Elara stood at the back of the briefing room, her arms crossed. The voice said I was ready. Ready for what? Commander Solis looked at her. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. The ship set course for the Dark Reach, a journey that would take 3 weeks. During that time, Elara found herself drawn to the observation deck more often, staring out at the stars, trying to make sense of what had happened. The glow in her hands had faded completely, but she could still feel it, a warmth just beneath her skin, a presence that was not quite her own. Iskra joined her one evening, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "You have been quiet," she said, handing 1 cup to Elara. Elara took the cup, grateful for the warmth. "I've been thinking. About the monolith," Elara nodded. "About what it said, about pain defining us. It's like it saw something in me, something I didn't even know was there." Iskra sipped her coffee. "You are different, Elara. You always have been, but that is not a bad thing. It is what makes you strong." Elara smiled faintly. "Or what makes me insane?" Iskra laughed softly. "Perhaps both." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars, and Elara felt a sense of calm settle over her. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it